All right, we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. So we'll get started here in a couple minutes. We'll get people logged on. If you have questions that you want to submit, you could enter it. If you're watching live, you can enter it in the comments field on the right-hand side of the video window. If you're watching it offline, we usually get started. We usually collect questions and then get started. So we might get started about 10 minutes. We'll get people logged in. So if you're watching offline, you may want to try to skip to about 10 minutes ahead. But if you want to just do a quick email introduction, or just in the comments field, if you want to just say where you're from, and if you have topics that you want covered, we can copy that over. We had some people that had submitted questions in advance. So we'll go ahead and get started from that. So once again, if you have questions, please feel free to enter them in the comments field. We had some really interesting questions sent in advance. And you could always send questions in advance to Club Cubase at steinberg.net. So we're always in that way. If we need to prepare a file, we can go ahead and it could be a little faster sometimes, so I could have a file prepared for that. But once again, feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from. If you have questions, feel free to kind of type them in, and we could get started in just a couple minutes. So we see people getting logged in. Okay, so people are getting logged in, asking some questions. Great. Okay, so we're just collecting some questions here. And again, if you're watching live, we're just going to collect questions and enter them into I'll copy them over, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. All right, so we have people from India, Qatar, I believe that's a correct pronunciation, Dallas, Texas, Hastings, Michigan, all right, just copying some questions over. All right, so we had a question on whatever happened with the new video system that was announced for Cubase last year. I think we will see it come out in Nuendo 8, which is coming out pretty soon. So then I believe it's going to be migrated to Cubase shortly thereafter, but it is about to see its initial release, and I believe in the next major version of Nuendo, which is, I think, maybe next week. So we have Mark from Chicago. And we have Belfast, Northern Ireland. I'm just copying over some questions that are coming in. All right, so just copying over questions. More people are getting logged in. All right, so we have Sweden in the house. Switzerland. Okay, we have some good questions coming in. Thank you, everyone. So still copying over questions. Thanks for everyone's great questions. Okay, still copying over some questions. A lot of people from all over the world. It's great. Okay, still copying over questions. Okay, just going through, make sure I didn't leave out any questions. We'll get started here in a minute. Okay, so just a couple more questions just come in. All right, a lot of questions coming in. Sorry, who gets copying some of them over. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have a lot of questions come in. We'll try to get through all of them, time permitting. We had questions that were sent in advance. One of the questions I got is to start off with is a question that I often get a lot when people want to deal with something like audio and dealing with breaths. So I got a question asking, I think it was from Rob, had emailed this in, and he wanted to take a file that had perhaps a vocal recording with breaths and come up with a way to easily kind of touch it up. So let's say if we have something like this, we'll have some, I'll just make it perhaps a little louder so you can hear breaths. And sometimes this happens a lot when we have dynamics applied like in a hardware path before the vocal is recorded. Not only does it kind of, keep the loud dynamics in control, but it can often boost more subtle things like breath. Now, what a lot of people do, and I've done this for years, where I will just grab my split tool here and split the breath and just kind of use my fade handles here. So my clip gain to just take, the problem is if you mute or erase just that particular event, it could often sound like a light switch that's going on and off in a play, and there's no noise floor, and all of a sudden you have this kind of where it's completely off, and then you have a bit of noise floor from the microphone signal, and then it suddenly turns on. It can be a little jarring to the users. Now, if you have to do this across multiple vocal takes, let's say we have stacked vocals or a lot of background vocals, kind of doing this process can be a little tedious. So if you're doing that for a number of different breaths and being able to kind of cut that down using the kind of the clip gain. So I actually created a macro, and we had gotten this question asked a couple of Hangouts ago about using how to make a macro, and I just couldn't think of something to make a macro for off of the top of my head. So I'm going to come here, and a macro actually executes a series of keyboard shortcuts. So I created a macro, and you could create a macro by going into your key commands area. And once you go to the key commands, you'll see this little option here that says show macros. And I made one here. I'm just going to go ahead and build it from scratch for you guys so we can see what we want to do. So the first thing, once we have our key commands, and again, you go to your file menu, to key commands, and we only have to set this up once, but we're going to choose new macro, and I'm going to call this minimize breaths. or plosives, I should say, after that mic pop there. Okay, and what I want to do is to actually just define a key command that's going to trigger this macro. And if you want to search for functions, if you go to the top center part, there's an actual search function. So since I just created a macro, even though it's not doing anything yet, I could just type in minimize breaths, and at this point it's just going to show up here, and I'm going to assign a key command. I'll do like command option B, and then click assign. So right now I've created my own key command to trigger this macro. Now we don't have any actual steps in the macro, so I'm going to go ahead and create a macro. And macros can be very simple, like 2 or 3 things, and often it's really just to kind of stop repetitive motions. So as we do this, let's say I want to build my macro of minimize breaths. Now the first thing I want to do is basically what I'm going to do is to select a range. I'm going to use the range selection tool. I'm going to select a range of events, and then what I want to do is to select that event and drop the volume. So, and again, I want this all to be where it's just almost completely automated. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to search for a function called locators to selection. So we'll type that in. And what I want to do is to add that command. So what that's going to do is put the left and right locators around the selection. And then what I want to do is to split the range of that selection. And let's add the command. And sometimes what you want to do is to actually switch tools. So since I'm starting with a range selection tool in this process, what I want to do is to be able to select an object. So I want to just switch it to my select tool. So again, I type that in, and now we'll go ahead and add this as a command. And now I want to, there's a little function where I want the playhead to go to the left locator, because what we want to do is to be able to select this little bit of audio. So I'm going to go here to go to left locator. And let's add that command. And then there's a function that allows you to select the events under the cursor. And that's called auto select events. So type in auto event selects under events under cursor. Now let's go ahead and add this command. Now what I want to do is for that event to be selected, I need to nudge the playhead. So I'm going to nudge the playhead over by 1 frame. So there's a nudge by 1 frame. Let me just switch here to nudge. All right, so I'm going to add this as my command. And what I want to do is to actually just select this track. And we're going to take a look at what our macro has done. And the macro can actually just show up directly under macros here. So we can see a minimize breaths option. So I'm going to select a range. And as we do this, let's say that was a breath, I could now just trigger from the edit menu our macro. So what this is going to do is take the files, move the playhead, split it, move the left and right locators, move the playhead 1 frame, and then select it. So if I did it correctly, it's now done that. So what I want to do now is to actually just trigger an event command. We're going to continue building the macro. So again, we'll go to File, to Key Commands, and let's go to our Show Macros, and we see our Minimize Breaths. And there's a really handy key command that a lot of people don't know about, and that's called decrement event volume, and this will knock down the audio by 1 dB at a time. So here it is. I just typed in decrement. We have decrement event volume. And let's say I just wanted to knock it down by 12 dB. So what I would do is just to have this command in there 12 times. Okay, now I had switched the state to enable selected events under the cursor. So what I want to do is to actually change that state back to where we started with. So we're going to say auto select events under cursor. Okay, so now we'll add that command. And since we wanted to start with the range tool, what I'm going to do is to switch it back from our select tool to our range tool. So just search for that function and let's add that command. So now if I wanted to take we'll listen to some of the breaths here in this vocal.
What did you say?
So let's say there's kind of a nasty breath right there. I'm going to grab my range selection tool and I could select just that range right here. And instead of doing those 12 steps or having a cut, I could just simply go here and trigger my macro to minimize the breaths. So now we could listen to the vocal.
You say you wished it all.
So let's say I have kind of a nasty breath coming in. I think right in between here. We'll zoom in just a little bit.
Wished it all.
So again, what I could do if I just wanted to trigger this macro, just grab my range selection tool, and now I could actually just hit the keyboard shortcut, and now it's just triggered that macro just that easily.
All away.
So let's say here we have kind of a nasty breath. So again, I could just grab my range selection tool, fire off that key command to trigger the macro.
And I'm left here for
So let's say again, right here, nasty breath. And you can see that instead of having to kind of do this like 14 times, you could just select that region. And now we'll get this one last breath here, and then we'll go back and just kind of listen to our edits just like that. So once you kind of build that macro,
you wished it all away. And I'm left here for 1,000 years.
and I'd say we'll just get that last breath in this phrase here again. So again, whatever kind of frame, whatever phrase you want to be part of the macro, you could just kind of come here, trigger that macro, and now you could just easily minimize breaths. You still hear a little bit of breaths, which is natural. But at that point, you could just simply have that all set up. So again, if you wanted to kind of look at the macro, we'll just review that. If you wanted to build it, we can see if we can get it posted somewhere online as well. But really, all you have to do is go to your key commands, and we'll show the macro. And here's the minimize breaths macro is what I called it. So again, it's the transport locators to selection, the split range. We want to go to the select tool. We want to jump to the left locator, auto select events under the cursor to nudge one frame. And then we're going to just decrement event volume 12 times. And you could change that depending on the source material to 3 times, 6 times, whatever, however many dB it'll go down. I wanted to switch back to the auto select events under cursor back to its previous status. and then select the range tool. So as you can see, it's very kind of fast to do that. And I realize it might seem involved to do that, but once you have that set up and just kind of set up as your own key command, you could at that point just simply fire that off instead of having to do it manually. So if you wanted to do it manually, you could, but we got a question on, if there's a quicker way to work with breaths, and that's a great pretty simple solution and very effective to kind of minimize breath noises. So again, I'll see if we can get that posted somewhere where if people wanted to download it. But if you just kind of follow the steps again, you can easily build that macro yourself and be kind of getting rid of breaths and guitar noises and stuff like that very easily. All right, so I'm just going to review some of the comments and we'll move on to our next question. So just going through some of the comments. I see one of the things that we have started is kind of a Q&A series on the Cubase YouTube channel. We have some coming on Wavelab as well. So just kind of some topics like this that are kind of broken down. So we're seeing some people having positive comments on that. So I'm glad that's been helpful. But just go through some more comments and we'll go through some of the questions sent in. Okay, so another question that we had mailed in was just like how to do like a quick overview of the audio pool and what, and we often get this question, what's the difference between the audio pool and the Mediabay? So Mediabay will actually allow you to see all of the audio. They're both found in the media menu. So when we go to Mediabay, one of the things that we could do is Mediabay's, think about this as being all of the audio files, project files, video files, stuff like that that's spread across your entire hard disk or your network locations. Now the pool is going to be specific to the project. So when you actually go to start a project, and we go to new project, we actually have, and this is a very critical little thing on a new project, you could have it automatically make a project folder for you, or if you wanted to actually, I usually have it prompt for project location. And what that'll do is that will actually allow you to, when you start a project, to define the project folder where all the audio files will be stored. So we can think of the pool as being all of the audio files that are used in this particular project. Now the pool shows us not only the name, we could also, if we kind of scroll over, you could see the path of where the files are, what the waveform image is, the origin time or what the timestamp is, the date it was recorded, what type of audio file it is, and these can be kind of rearranged. So if you wanted to change the order as you see fit, you could just drag and drop. So if you didn't need to see the type of file, but the origin time was more critical for you, you could just simply kind of rearrange and drag the columns as appropriate. Now, there's a couple of handy things, a lot of handy things that can be accessed directly from within the pool itself. So if you wanted to come here, you could import audio files, audio CDs directly into the pool. And you also see this import pool, export pool. And this could actually be saved as, these used to be called libraries. So let's say if you're working, and we have a lot of people that are doing like commercial jingles, and they have to have like, I have a friend does a lot of work for Walmart, and he has to have kind of like the Walmart audio tag, or a CBS tag and stuff like that. So every time we're doing a project for that client, they could actually just import a pool, which is a collection of audio files, if you want, that could be accessed directly in there. You could also select an audio file and do really handy stuff like reveal and explore or reveal and finder. If you have erased an audio file, the pool will allow you to kind of find missing files. Now, sometimes you may record a number of different files. And at that point, what you want to do is maybe you've erased a number of takes that weren't, takes that you actually wanted to do. So at this point, you could actually just remove unused files if you wanted to. And so just some handy different organizations. Now, if you want to do some different processing, you could also just run it through plugins, just kind of like we do with our batch, or if you wanted to do kind of offline processing of files directly from the pool, you could just kind of come directly here. And these are all different things that could be used to organize all of your files within the project. So we can think of the pool as being all the files associated with the project, and the Mediabay being more of all of the files that are available on your computer system to access. So the pool is automatically saved with the project. And one thing that's really handy is you could actually, at this point, if you get really organized, you could actually create folders. So you can say, I want all my drums to be organized within this particular folder if you wanted to. So it's a way of being able to manage all of your audio files within the project itself. And it's a very powerful part of the program, and it kind of runs in the background a lot of times. You don't really have to access the pool a lot until you actually start, if you run into file management problems. And it's one of the parts of the program that really was so well conceived, and I think it was done by a former developer of ours that passed away a number of years ago, Mark Badger, and it really hasn't changed much since its initial inception. So that's kind of a quick overview on the audio pool. So I'm going to go through some of your questions, see if there's any additional questions come in via comments, and then we'll move on. Thanks everyone for great questions. Okay, just copying over some questions. Good to see Michael from Reliable Music. I was just thinking about that story the other day. So, second question, when will the Alt-K for the keyboard shortcut be fixed? I passed that along. I'll see if I can get more of a definitive answer, but I think it kind of stopped working in 9.0.2.0. So we apologize for the inconvenience with that. Okay, so we have a question. Would you explain ASIO-Guard and whether or not we should turn it on? So what ASIO-Guard allows you to do is once you have a project that's set up inside of, once you have your audio system set up, you run it at a buffer size. So a lot of times when we come here, we could actually get an idea of exactly what our buffers are here. Now, for a lot of times, some people would, as they track a file, they may record with lower latency and raise the latency for when people are mixing, because it's not as critical when you're mixing, but tracking, it could be more critical to have lower, more responsive latency for monitoring purposes. So what ASIO-Guard allows you to do is to actually, instead of all the tracks constantly running at a lower resolution, making the computer work harder. And the question often comes to me is like, why doesn't everyone just run everything at super low latencies? It's because it takes more processing power. So the lower the latency, the higher the CPU usage. The lower the latency, or the higher the latency, the lower the CPU usage. So what ASIO-Guard allows you to do is to take only the tracks that are being actively recorded and runs that at a lower latency, and the other tracks are run at a multiple of the latency higher. So if you're running at 256 buffers, the other tracks can be playing back at 1024 buffers. So it's usually kind of a multiple or 2 or 4. So at that point, it allows you to run larger projects with lower latencies, and those lower latencies are only on the actively recorded tracks. So it's a good thing to have on. So that's what ASIO-Guard will allow you to do. And again, you could just activate it directly here from your device menu to device setup, and you can see your VST audio system, and you could just have the activate ASIO-Guard turned on. So it's a good thing to have on. So some people will call it a hybrid audio engine, which will do stuff like that. So some different companies have been kind of incorporating this technology and this concept for a while. So we've been doing it for a couple versions and really kind of enhanced that functionality. Okay, so we see if I throw a question on FabFilter, I'm not a FabFilter user, so I apologize. But we'll see if we get help. If I throw FabFilter's Pro Q and try to EQ the sides, it does nothing. If I solo preview just that sideband, I hear nothing. Any ideas? We have some similar functionality with the built-in plugin on, or one of the built-in plugins, where we could EQ the sides, and this plugin is one of the EQ plugins. It's really fabulous, and it's called Frequency, and this may be something similar. So here, even though I have the ability to do left, right, and mid sides, it's on a mono track, and since it's on a mono track, it doesn't allow me to EQ the left and right channels independently. Now, if I wanted to go to my stereo output, and let's go ahead and run my frequency EQ plugin here. So as soon as it is on a stereo track or a stereo bus, then I could do mid-side, stereo, or left, right. So there's maybe the reason that you're not seeing the sides is because it's on a mono track. So you may want to send that mono track to a stereo group and be able to EQ that stereo group with the FabFilter. And I'm not, again, familiar with FabFilter, unfortunately. If you guys want to send me a copy, I'd be happy to check it out. But I don't have that. But that would be a thought that would kind of come up in my mind with that. All right, so let's move on to a couple other questions. Okay, so question, please. I'm using function import track from project. The other projects have different sampling rate and bit depth, sounding awful. So there's one thing that you can set up, and there's a preference. And if you're not familiar with this particular function, it's really handy if you get projects from someone. You could actually just simply come here and say, okay, I want to import specific tracks from a project. And we could choose a project here. So let me just select a quick project. And now, once you do this, you could import kind of all the different tracks independently. So if you have a vocal or guitar part or a drum loop from a completely different project, you can import that. Now, it looks like, there's different project settings here where you could have different sample rates, and you could do that. Now, there is a preference to be aware of, and sometimes when you do this, if you're playing back different sample rates, it could be sometimes the not the thing that you would want to do. So if you go to under editing audio, and then you could just simply come here, and there's a function. So if you go to preferences, editing to audio, on import audio files, there's a little function here for open options dialog. So if you do that, and if you import the audio files and it's a different sample rate, you could have it automatically convert it, or you could use the settings. And when you have use settings, that will automatically convert to the project sample rate for you. So you may want to, and could be one of those dialog boxes that pops up once, and then there's a little thing that says, "Don't show me this again." So a lot of people hit that little option and aren't aware that there's different sample rates going on. So just kind of be aware that you could do that. And also, as we had mentioned, the pool, if you wanted to go to the audio pool here, I think we could actually just within the pool itself, you could choose to, if you have different sample rates, and here again you could see the sample rate of the audio file. So at this point we could just right click, and then there's a convert files function, and here you could actually do sample rate conversions directly from there. So if you have files that are imported from different projects, you could try also to just change the sample rate there, and that should do the trick for you. But yeah, it can be tough sometimes dealing with different sample rates. I just saw kind of a whole Facebook discussion on this. So, everyone should work with one sample rate, and people are going back and forth. But just always kind of be cognizant of that. But check out that preference, and within the pool, try changing and doing a sample rate conversion, and I think that'll help you out. All right, so I'm just going to go through some comments and see if there are other questions have snuck in. And I'm seeing a comment on the macros, and yeah, the macros are incredibly powerful, but the macros can also include logical editor presets, project logical editor presets as well. So you can sometimes create a project logical editor function and have that as part of a macro. So once you kind of really start experimenting with that, I've had to create a lot in years past. I used to make a lot of macros for Stevie Wonder, when he couldn't do stuff non-visually. And then, we found that functions for people that were blind also help people that see run their Cubase faster. So. Okay, so I'm seeing a question. I'll just move my microphone so I can read this a little better. Saying I have multiple MIDI track parts and have controller data on them on different tracks. How do I set the expression, CC lanes, and editors? Same for all the tracks. They seem to default to velocity. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a MIDI track. Sorry for all the subwoofers being used. All right, so when we come here, I'm just going to add some MIDI tracks in this particular project. Let's just add some blank MIDI parts here. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this a couple times. Okay, so usually by default what you have is your velocity information represented in like your MIDI key editor here. So that's pretty typical, but what you can do is actually, if you click here, you could actually see a number of different functions. So if you wanted to see pitch bend, I'll just go ahead and grab my pencil tool, and I'll just go ahead and kind of draw in some other controllers here. And then if you actually click in the lower left-hand corner, you could add different controller lanes. So here, if I want to see pitch bend, I want to see velocity. And again, if I just kind of click right here, I could then say, okay, I want to see expression or modulation. So at this point, I can say, okay, here's my mod. I'll just kind of turn off my snap. And let's say this will be expression. So now once I kind of have these all, and let's say I want this to be my main volume. And what's handy about this is you could actually save this as, if you click just to the right, you could save this as a preset. And one of the things that was helpful in like version 9 is you could actually kind of have some of these kind of tuck away depending on your editor screen as well. So once you kind of have that set, I could now, let's say if I go to another part, those will automatically stick right there. So while it may default to velocity, once you kind of have that set up, that will, those settings will stick for your different controller lanes. So I know I set that up for a lot of film composers who want to see like main volume, velocity, expression, modulation. And they want to see like, 3 or 4 specific controller lanes. So again, if you just kind of click in the plus sign, you could create multiple controller lanes. And if you do this for the particular part, let's say if I'm in the editor, what's really handy is as you could have this, as you kind of tuck this down for different heights, you can see that the different controller lanes will automatically appear to make kind of best use of different track heights as well. So at that point, you could just kind of have them tuck away just like that. So I think once you set it up, it should stick for all of your parts, and then you'll be in good shape for that. All right, I'm just going to read through some of the comments, go through some of our questions. All right. So seeing a question about zooming. Is it possible to zoom horizontal and vertical at the same time? If you wanted to, I mean, you could use the zoom tool. So just kind of right click here. And I think, let me just see if there's a, so I just held down like the command key, and that would allow you to kind of zoom both vertically and horizontally. Let me just see if I just select that, and on Mac, if I do command key, I could just zoom just like that. So using the zoom tool and holding down, it's probably control on PC, you could zoom both vertically and horizontally. And if you want to undo your zoom, just double click in an area, like a blank area, and then you could just go back to different zoom values. So even if you zoom in once, twice, 3 times, come here to a blank area and double click. So say if I was here, I could just double click and have kind of a zoom history of, so I could just go back to my different zoom levels. Okay, I'm seeing a question. I'm interested in the Okay, so there's a question. I was interested in MIDI map expression. I tried a pass and could not get the effect of like a bass on, or tried on bass and couldn't get the effect of slide, for instance. Okay, so let me just come here. And a lot of times it could depend on what actual content that you have in a project. So I'll just do a new project here. And since you said you did it with bass, we'll see if we have a project with bass in it. So I think if we go to our HALion Sonic SE, we'll just load up a bass preset here. And we'll try just an electric bass. And usually if it has like a VX, that can mean that it has some of the different articulations. All right, so let's try just electric bass of VX, and we can see what articulations are actually in this. So I'm going to create a blank part. So you can see even in another project, my controller lane's stuck. So now let's say if I just wanted to see my expression maps here for this particular, I'll import key switches. Okay, so we have some key switches here. So it could really kind of depend on your different key switches. So let me see what is in, so sometimes people will make a key switch that doesn't have sample content that appears with it. So I'm just going to just kind of draw in some notes here. Okay, so depending on the articulation, so let's say if I just play this selected range here. And I'll just kind of draw in some of the articulations here. So depending on the actual sample content, what you're doing, it could be if you don't have the instruments that kind of set that up, So let's just try doing soft articulation here. And let's say I'll just kind of put a note in here, and we'll just do, see if that's a slap. And go back here. So now we have some different articulations here. So when I drew in a slap, it could do that. But, if the sample doesn't have like a slide, or the sound doesn't have a slide, you won't necessarily hear that. It's going to send that key switch information to play back that different layer of sounds. So make sure that if you don't hear it, that you actually kind of see the events, that the sound that you're using actually has the capability of multiple articulations. And a lot of times what you see is just the extension of VX, and that's a good indication that when you see VX, that it's going to have different articulation possibilities. Okay, so we're seeing a question on automation for VST Instruments. So let's just jump back to a different project. And kind of questions on the audio signal path and for automation. So let's go ahead and discuss that. Okay, so let's go ahead and just take a look. And we have some different instruments here. So let's say if I just want to do
Did you say?
So when I come here, I could, let's say I select my piano. Now, depending on if it is a track instrument or a rack instrument, it could be slightly different. But when I come here, you're going to have, I'm going to select this. I think this is set up as a MIDI track, and it's being routed out to the grand. So now, if I wanted to, there's kind of two different modes. One is I could come here, and if you click on just, and usually it's kind of the main mode that you'd have is when you select this fader here, you could go to like a MIDI fader, and this is going to write MIDI volume continuous controller information. Now, if you kind of look here, and it can be slightly different for a VST instrument loaded in the instrument rack versus an instrument that's loaded as so instrument tracks and instrument racks can be handled slightly differently. But you'll also see, like for this MIDI part here, that I could click on the edit button. So I see kind of the MIDI parameters of this track, and here would be the MIDI volume message. But if I click here, this would route me to the audio channel characteristics of that virtual instrument. So now, while we play, if I want to take the piano,
You wished it all away, and I'm left here for
so if I wanted to automate that,
1,000 years and a day.
again, I can just come here and do just the piano. And now I'm just kind of automating. So let's say I'll just rewind just a little bit. Like it now, excuse me. So I go to rewind. So now you can see that it's written it into that actual track where the audio is being sent to. So again, click right here, and then you can see my automation. So now you'll see the EQ sweeps. And now it's just kind of automated as a normal piano part. So you don't have to. Now, if it's set up as a virtual, as an instrument track, it's even a little more simple. So I could just come here and let's say if I add an instrument track, it's going to kind of be consolidated. So if I come here, let's say I add an instrument track, and now I wanted to route it to my synth. So as soon as I come here and click on the edit button, so as soon as you just actually come here, click on the edit button, it's going to consolidate and kind of take you straight to the audio characteristics. So a VST instrument track, an instrument track would allow you to immediately jump there and automate it. If it's in the instrument rack, look for it kind of in the secondary edit screen here. So you have all the MIDI information plus the audio characteristics directly below there. So that's where you could do all of your signal processing, run it through effects, automate the volume levels. So I hope that makes sense. If not, just leave a comment in the field and we'll go ahead and start with that. Now, we also had an interesting question kind of emailed in. Let me see, I think we have a project, and it was about Pitchbend and dealing with different tempo changes. So let's just activate this project here. So I just kind of created some data here. Let's go ahead and, so I kind of drew in some Pitchbend data here. So let's just go ahead and play this back. So I just did some super annoying Pitchbend. And let me read the question. I'll find it just so we can have it make sense for everyone. So the question is, they're using an EWI breath controller to play a VST instrument, and the vibrato I play is recorded as CC2. So that's, and he indicates pitch bend, but that's actually, I believe, breath control. Sometimes during editing, I change the tempo of a section of a song. The vibrato that I've recorded becomes unnatural. So I need to correct this on all affected MIDI automation Pitchbend tracks. So first question was, can you demonstrate how to stretch or shrink all the CC data in time? The very best solution would be if I could highlight selection of automation values and shrink it or stretch horizontally on the timeline. The cursor does say stretch the lower right hand corner of my selected box, but it doesn't scale the control points. And also, is there a good shortcut to end Pitchbend control point back to the 0 line when I manually draw in points? I don't have mouse resolution to get that final back to 0 without seriously fiddling. So let's go ahead now. One of the things that you'll notice, and if sometimes if vibrato sounds a little unnatural, it could be that the vibrato at one tempo works, and within the actual instrument itself, it doesn't quite respond the same way when you change tempo. So one of the cool things that Cubase will do is, as you change tempo on a particular part here, so let's say we'll just play this annoying little synth part again. Kind of whatever tempo you have, it will automatically kind of play back correctly at said tempo. So if I have it at 140, or if I wanted to play it back at 200 beats a minute without any tempo changes, I could just come here and Cubase will faithfully play this back at kind of whatever tempo you have. So if we go to 60, so you can see that while it is playing it correctly and it's moving the and it's kind of moving the pitch bend range according to tempo. Now, sometimes it may not sound as smooth as you would like. One thing, let's try just a quick logical editor preset. So if I wanted to, I'm just going to go to my edit. I think it's under MIDI, or we have our logical editor. So one thing that we could try is to set this up as what we want to do is extract, and we're going to say type is equal to pitch bend. And I know you said it was CC2, but and then let's go ahead and extract. So I'll say apply, and now I can see my pitch bend data here. Now, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is when you come here, you could try this, and if you needed to kind of change the tempo or MIDI information, you have the sizing handles here. So this information here, what I did is basically with that logical editor preset was I just extracted pitch bend without any notes. But now if I wanted to, let's say I cut this particular part, and I'll just turn on my snap, so I'm kind of right at the bar, and you have your different sizing handles, and there's one of the sizing handles is sizing applies time stretch. So you could just simply take that particular MIDI information here and just time compress the MIDI to fit the new range, and that could do the MIDI or the pitch bend information. Now, part two of the question, so you can give that a try, and it may not work. Sometimes the vibrato that works at one tempo sounds really hokey and unmusical at a different tempo. But that's something that you could try, is actually just to kind of time compress, extract the pitch bend, and to do that within the logical editor, come here, and again under MIDI, you could choose the logical editor, and you want to say type what we want in under function is to say extract, and we want to say type is equal to pitch bend, and that will extract the pitch bend from the selected part. So you can see that this just has notes in it now, and this just has pitch bend. Now you'd asked also about when editing pitch bend data. I don't know of a way to have it automatically go to 0 or to go to the default value. Now, an easy way to do this is to actually, when you go to the MIDI part, is to look at it in the list editor. And here, if you wanted to go to a specific value, here you could just type in, I think it's 8192 is the 0 point. So instead of looking at it in the typical key editor where you're looking for the value kind of in this little window here as you enter it in, which could be a little mind numbing, take a look, and this is exactly kind of a great function for the MIDI list editor. So here you can see all the pitch bend data, and if you wanted to select a range of it and say, okay, at this point I want them all to be 8192, I think we can do that for all of the, you could just simply come here and just change that value right there. So depending, because MIDI pitch bend actually has 16,184 or something like that values, and your MIDI controllers like your CC2 that you mentioned could have 128 values 0 to 127, but you could easily kind of enter that in the list editor. And that's probably a very appropriate way and tool of doing that. So you can try to actually extract the MIDI data here, or just simply take, and try the time compression of that. But again, one, pitch bend or, some MIDI data that is expressive in nature at different tempos may not translate over. Just kind of the nature of the beast. Now, I had a question emailed this morning. It was kind of an interesting question about the input transform. Excuse me. About the input transformer. And the question was, the person had Cubase AI9 and they wanted to be able to set up a live performance. So let me just add a couple MIDI tracks here. And these were going out to different instruments, and they were wanting to know if there's a way to automatically split so you want to take these, route it to different instruments. These are going to different channels, and they wanted to be able to take incoming MIDI controller messages and have it mapped to specific ranges and particular MIDI channels. And unfortunately, this isn't in Cubase AI version, but I'll show you what you could do in kind of the full version if you're interested in upgrading to kind of get this. And one of the things is a function called the input transformer. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, and we could put this on local for this particular track. And the first thing you want to do is make sure that the input transformer, this will take incoming MIDI data. Now when Cubase has incoming MIDI data, it will actually just simply it sees it from from any source going to any different MIDI channel. So sometimes I get this question from guys that are wanting to map out different controllers simultaneously, like a keyboard, drum pads, an electronic drum set, and someone has a MIDI guitar and they want to do kind of live performances and to only play back particular MIDI channels and ranges. So what we could do is we could set up different filter targets. And again, I apologize that this isn't in the person who sent the question had Cubase AI9, which is bundled probably with Steinberger Yamaha hardware. But what we want to do is we could set up different filters. So the first thing we want to do is we want to actually choose to filter. So we're going to take our function here, choose filter, and we want to filter channels. Let's say if I wanted this to be on MIDI channel 4, but only particular pitches. So that's all in my particular keyboard MIDI messages that are coming out. So I could say we want to set the channel unequal to channel 4. So it's going to filter out everything except MIDI channel 4. And now I could click on this plus sign, and then we're going to say a MIDI note message, and we're going to say value 1, and then we could choose inside range. So I'll just hit some keys on my MIDI keyboard, and it'll just learn that particular note range. So now when I do that, I can say what we want to do is to filter everything that's basically not on channel 4, and we could say inside range, or we could choose outside range of that. And you could set that up on every single channel, so that way every track you could choose what channel is the MIDI keyboard source, the MIDI input source that it's being received from, and the range. And you could also set, if you wanted to, only velocities. So if you say value 2, which is going to be velocity in the MIDI note range, so you can say velocities that are bigger than 44. So you could set up like some pretty extensive MIDI control filters. Now, going back to the original question of Cubase AI9, I don't know of a way of doing that in Cubase AI9, but I think it'll start in Cubase Artist and higher. So again, that's just the input transformer. So that will allow you to kind of transform incoming MIDI data to different conditions. So it's kind of a Boolean editor similar to the logical editor. But again, if I could just come here and you could just simply set that up once, you could set it globally or locally, and then you could set up your own conditions for filtering. So we have a lot of people who do this for live concert use, where they just have a project loaded up with a bunch of different VST instruments, and then they'll be able to just kind of pick and choose different instruments that are being output from multiple MIDI controllers simultaneously. So while I'm sorry that it's not in Cubase AI9, you may want to consider just upgrading to get that function if it's really important to you. All right, so let's go through some other questions. We had a question on Wavelab and metadata tagging. And I exchanged an email with a customer, and it said that while meta tag information was available in MP3s in Wavelab, that when they did a WAV file using kind of Windows Explorer, that the metadata wasn't showing up. So a lot of programs, Wavelab can output metadata, an extensive amount of metadata on within audio files, but not a lot of programs can actually properly read the metadata. So I think that's probably what you're running into. So I think if you would load that into Wavelab or to a traditional audio program as opposed to Windows Explorer, that the metadata is there, but it's just often not being read. And we kind of get some confusion also with metadata when people are doing CD text. And they assume that services like iTunes and Amazon are extracting the text, the song title, and all that from the CD text, and they actually don't read CD text, but use kind of a Grace Note database. So some clarity there on that particular subject with the metadata in Wavelab. So let's go through some more. I'm going to read through a couple comments and some of the other questions we'll get to. Thanks, everyone, for your wonderful questions. All right. Just reading through some of the comments. We have some more questions coming up. We'll get to those. Thanks for everyone's patience. Okay, so we have a question: how can I export an audio printout of the click without manually entering, without using MIDI to manually enter clicks? One of the things that I had done is just, currently there's not a real good way of printing an audio click. And I know that the planning managers are aware of this. And I had some discussions last time I was in Hamburg with that. But what I did is actually, as part of Groove Agent, and I've emailed this to people as well, and I'm happy to share this particular project, but I just made a preset here. Let me see if I may not have it on this computer. Let me just... Let me see if I can find it in Mediabay. But I just made a whole preference for like just a VST instrument Groove Agent preset of click tracks. So let me see if I have it on this computer. So let me just see if I can find... See if this is the right one. Okay, so what I made, and let me see if this is... I just made a kind of a Groove Agent preset. Let me just see if I could. And what I did is I have different click tracks. And then what you're able to do with this is to literally just kind of drag this to your timeline, and now you could just simply, drag it out and make your own click track. So from kind of having a click track that's printed, I just recorded the click track and then made different MIDI patterns of that. But there's different methods. That's one way of doing it, but I know that the developers are aware of it, and I think that there may be a solution coming to make it a little easier. But if you need that functionality right now, and if you have Groove Agent, I could send you the full click track instrument kit that I made, or we can see if we can get it uploaded for people to download as well. Okay, just going through different comments coming in, some other questions. Okay, so we have a question. I have a UR44. How can I make a mix for the performer without altering my mix? And it's a great question, so let's go ahead and go through that. I'll just open up in our project here. Okay, so let's say I have a number of different sources here. So I'm going to have guitars, bass, drums, kind of typical rock band. Now what I could do is use the control room and I'm going to set this up in my device setup. And what I want to do is just go to my VST connections. And you could use this with any audio interface. It helps if you have one with multiple headphones or multiple outputs. But what I want to do is I'll just remove this. And if we want to set up headphone mixes, and these can be like really critical, what we want to do is just select the Studio tab. And this is in Cubase Pro and Nuendo. So I'm going to come here and let's say I want this for my vocalist. So I'm just going to relabel this Vox. And I'm going to add 4 Q mixes here. And we'll call it bass. And we'll add our drum Q mix. Okay, so what we want to do is to have, everyone tends to want a more me headphone mix. So as soon as we do this, I'm going to go to kind of our full screen mix console here. And I want to make sure that we have the control room active here. So we see that we're going to have our vocal, guitar, bass, and drums. And what you want to do is in the racks, make sure that you have Q sends turned on. So now I have my Q sends, and what I want to do is I'm going to select all the channels in my mix console. So I'll start here, select the first channel. And go to the last channel. I'm going to hold down the shift key. And now what I want to do is I could go to all of my control rooms. I'm going to right click and I say I want to first of all make sure that all of them are activated. And then what I want to do is to actually use the all cues. I want to use the current mix levels. So what we see is we have kind of our faders here, and then we have our actual cue mixes here. So if I take this particular track and then I move this fader here for my vocal cue mix, it's going to make this track louder in the vocal headphone mix. So what I want to do now is I'm going to select a number of different, let's say all of my drum tracks here. And then I want to add more of the drums into the drummer's headphone mix. And I'm going to activate the quick link here. So now we could just send more drums to the drummer's headphone mix. And then I want to send more of the bass to the bass player's headphone mix. And so now, and we can kind of do this, let's select the guitar parts here. Okay, so here's my guitar parts. Let's make the guitar parts a little louder. So now when I do this, I could listen to my own mix in the control room. Then if I want to go to the drummer's cue mix, I could listen to that. Now the bass player's mix. The guitar player's headphone mix. Bass. So, depending how many separate mixes that you want to send out could really be dependent on how many outputs. So if you have the UR44, you have 4 outputs, you have 2 distinct headphone outs. So at that point, you could just go with the UR44, go to your devices, and at this point, just go to your audio hardware setup, and then you could actually choose, mix 2 to just be on the second headphones that you want, and then you could have multiple, up to 4 different Q mixes out. So that's how you could do kind of an alternate Q mix for performers versus what you're listening to in the control room. And again, the big thing is just kind of to right click here, and then you will see the all Qs once you have that set up in your VST connections of your control room. So give that a shot, and I think that will do the trick for you. Okay, so just read through some comments here. Okay, so just reading through comments. Someone said I wasn't using the latest version of Cubase. I think I am. I'll just make sure. Yeah, I'm running the latest version of Cubase. So my project may say Cubase 7 or something like that, but I'm running the latest version. So. Right, so just reading through some of the comments, so we'll get to some more questions. All right, so a question about kind of doing some alignment with vocals, and if you could open 2 of them within an editor. So I think we'll see some of this technology coming in the future, but let's go ahead and take a quick look. So let's say I wanted to look at these 2 vocal parts. So a lot of people will just kind of, blow them up really large and do editing like so. I know some people, so you could do a lot of stuff there. Now, if you come here, let's say if I select these, and then from the audio menu, and this is kind of an older way that some people will do it, kind of a Nuendo 1-esque vintage editing mode. So let's come here, and I want to take these and select events to part from the audio menu. And now when I double click, I could actually see these both in the part editor. I don't think that you're going to have kind of like the warping functionality to kind of do that, but you could still kind of do, tremendous amount of, different editing tasks here if you wanted to. So you could try also just kind of doing parts to editor, and then once that's done, if you wanted to see it in the sample editor, what you want to do is from the audio menu, choose to dissolve part, and then you can edit it directly within the sample editor, or see it directly here on this edit screen as well. So you could do that. And I think it's been announced in kind of Nuendo 8 that there will be some kind of aligning functionality coming soon with that. So it should be interesting technology that hopefully will make its way into Cubase, which would make sense. Okay, just we're reading through some comments here. So let's go through some comments and we'll go through some of their questions people sent in earlier. So people are kind of commenting on the lack of SD2 files. So I think even a company that invented them kind of dropped support for it like 10 or 15 years ago. So so it might be kind of a bit of a dated file format. So I don't think we'll see Sound Designer 2 files be supported anytime soon, or much work going on in that. I believe you can still import them into WAV file and batch convert them if necessary. So a question, will Steinberg let you change the user GUI? To a certain point, you could, there's a lot of different preferences for event display. So, you could have a lot of different color schemes as well for different functions in the program. It's not, I wouldn't call it skinnable. Then you probably wouldn't want it to be, so that there's some semblance of continuity between different windows. But there is a lot of different components that you can change in the color schemes and event display preferences to customize the appearance for you. So question, is Cubase Pro as strong as Nuendo? There's a lot of the same core technology in Cubase and Nuendo. Nuendo is going to have some very specific feature sets. Like if you're doing ADR functionality, like, replacing dialogue in film or game audio, there's a lot of really handy functionality for working with Wise game middleware. So if you're a game sound designer or do game audio work, that will make a lot of sense. And there's also a lot more extensive surround sound. So you have Dolby Atmos panning. So a lot more kind of specific for game audio stuff. But, if you're doing primarily music production, Cubase would meet your needs for just about anything. But if you're doing, very specific type of game audio production, post-production, there's some things in Nuendo that are unique. Reconforming is one of those, and, some other things as well. All right, so it was the question. I tried to use the tempo detection, but eventually kind of got out of time. So if you do a tempo detection of a track, let me see if I could see if I get a tempo detection that kind of messes up on something. So, once in a while you may run into a particular file that that doesn't, that the tempo mapping does a great job. I've seen a few files that might throw it off from time to time. So let me just see if I can find one and we can show you some tips. Okay, so let's see if I just do this one here and do a tempo detection. So just go to my project menu and choose tempo detection. We'll see what this happens. This, so we'll do our analysis. So sometimes you may get the point, and this window stays open for a reason. It switches to this tool. So if for some reason you find that the tempo detection gets off, what you could do is just simply take, it switches it to the time warp tool and just simply make like the little adjustment right there. Then it's going to do a reanalysis from that point. And it does a pretty good job of trying to figure out exactly what the tempo detection is. But once in a while you may get a message saying, it's too irregular or something like that, or the algorithm can't figure it out. So if you come here and just manually set that time, at that point it will do a reanalysis from that point on. And that's why this function is turned on in the program. So you can say, oh no, the downbeat, the beat is right there, and then it does the analysis again. Once you close that window, that functionality will go away and it'll be kind of deemed that the tempo editing is done. So try to, if you have a point where it's off, as soon as you hear it off, just simply just move that particular point directly to the downbeat, and then it'll do a reanalysis and start over from there. All right, just reading through some more comments here. So the question was if you could use other sample instruments. Right now, like when we come here, we can see our instruments. These will be limited to Steinberg instruments. Maybe in the future, we'll see third-party instruments be supported. So if you're looking for to see the nice GUIs of third-party instruments, it's not currently supported. So sorry about that. And, this is another question that was emailed in about tempo detection working correctly. I can tell you from my personal experience that when 9 came out, I had some issues with it not working and kind of crashing my system. And with 9.02, that fixed the issue. So, if you have tempo issues, make sure that you're running 9.02. Because that fixed the situation for me. It was like the first thing I did after I did a demo and it didn't function. So 9.020, which was released in March-ish, that should do the trick for if you had tempo problems, make sure you're running that version. All right, so I got a question if I could put my cursor over the different categories. And to scroll up and down with my transport. Let me see. Using my scroll wheel. So I'm not sure if that's what the question was, if I could do that. You may want to reiterate or re-ask the question if I misunderstood, if I misunderstood that question. So I'm seeing a question, what about Logic or Presonus import? We currently don't have that. There's a lot of different features in Cubase that aren't available in other programs. So, and I think if we did an import from other tools that perhaps, that company could change, the file format. I don't think it's so easy to take different file formats. And I think we also respect the kind of intellectual property of the different file formats. So I don't know about that, but a lot of people will be able to print stems quite easily. So to migrate between different programs. Okay, so getting back to the tempo detection, you're seeing there's too many variations. That's exactly when you want to just manually kind of reset it, and then it'll do the reanalysis. So it may just need to say, okay, this is where the downbeat is, and then just kind of do that process again, and that should help with that. So, all right, so I'm going to go through some of the questions that were sent earlier in the Hangout, and we'll make sure we get through these. Thanks for everyone's patience. Okay, so I see a question. When you use the VST Connect menu to create the VST connection and it automatically does everything, is it also supposed to auto-create the VST Connect QMix? I think it depends on the status of your control room. So it may not do it if the QMixes aren't active or the control room isn't active. So you can check that out. Let's go through some of their questions. Okay, so we had a question on Groove Agent. This person's probably been very patiently waiting. We'll give this a try. Let's see if I can find a couple drum loops here real quick. Better audio. Sorry about this. We can find. Okay, so let's say we'll do this and drag this into our timeline. Okay, and I'm just going to follow the directions here. Okay, so the question is, we're going to highlight, I'll drag to the first pad. We're going to change poly exclusive. So let me see if I do this correctly here. So just let me change the poly and grip settings. I'm just blanking where. Maybe under the sample. All right. If you want to, I will play with the Groove Agent one. Maybe we'll come back to that. Or if you want to email me at Club Cubase, I mean, just take me a couple minutes to do. So we'll see if we have time to come back to. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.net, we can go through that. Let's go ahead and if we have time, we'll just see if we can get back to that. Okay, just going through some of the other questions that were sent in earlier. Okay, so a question, I recorded a piano track and would like to cut that in the middle. Can I trim the notes and the CC messages like sustain off to end at the first part so I could just start record after the cut? Let's take a look, go back to one of our other projects. All right, so the question is recording, being able to cut the MIDI and seeing if sustained messages carry over. So let's see if there's a preference for this, maybe. So I think maybe if you go under editing to MIDI, and then we'll just say split MIDI controllers as well as the preference. So let's say if I have different, see if I have any sustain messages in here. Okay, so I have some sustained messages. So let's say if I cut in the middle of the bar here, and we'll just zoom in. And then I'm going to just make sure we have our snap off. And let me just go ahead and look at it in my MIDI editor. So as you can see, when we did the cut, that it automatically kind of mapped it split not only the MIDI notes, but also the MIDI messages and kind of set that up. So make sure that you go to in your preferences under editing MIDI, and then make sure that when you split events that you also have split MIDI controllers active as well. All right, just reading through a couple of comments that have come in. Okay, so we had a question on direct monitoring or direct routing, a good idea for what to do for direct routing, if we could explain that. And direct routing often allows us to do a lot of different scenarios for like parallel processing. So let's say, thought maybe I had a direct routing video in here. Okay, yep, I do. So a lot of times what people want to do, and it's, you know, sometimes people call it New York processing or New York compression or parallel processing. So let's say if I have my audio tracks here, and let me just make sure that we have this set up in our control room. Give me 1 second. Okay, so let's say if I have drums, what a lot of people do is they'll take all their drums and be able to kind of take not only their drums, and what they want to do is apply kind of almost two different types of compression to it. And this can be very tricky to do routing on in a lot of programs. So we're going to go to our big mixer view here. So let's say I have my drums going into like an effects return channel here. So you can hear more of the reverb. And what we have in the racks is a little section called direct routing. So I'm going to turn that on. And what I want to do is I'm going to send all of my tracks directly to, and I'll even include the effect send. So what I want to do is to create two different group channels. So I'm going to right click here. We're going to add group channels. And we'll make two stereo group channels. All right, so I'm going to call this drums and drum parallel. Okay, so what I want to do is in the direct routing, I want to take all of my tracks and I want to route them to my drum bus. So I'll come here, let's take all these tracks, and what I want to do is I'm going to activate the quick link, and then I'm going to send these to drums. Okay, and there's a little function here. So we just see this little function menu, and here we want to make sure that direct routing summing mode is on. So now when I play back, all of my tracks are now routed into my group channel. So I could drop the volume of that. Now what I want to do is to also route these to my drum parallel. And we'll make sure that that is turned on. So now they're routed to my drum bus, and now they're routed to my drum parallel bus. So what I want to do is to actually just kind of come here, and let's say I'll just do kind of on this, I want to do kind of like an obnoxious bright EQ. And I want to also just kind of put a big compression on this one. So let's just kind of really so this one has pretty heavy compression, and this one doesn't. So when I bring this up, I can have all my drums. At this point, let's say I want to send all of my drum outputs here to the stereo output. Okay, so now I could have my group that's kind of the sum of that, and I could bring in my parallel channel. And what's cool about this routing through the direct is I could now solo just the parallel or the actual group. So that way I could kind of combine those two. So now let's say we'll just go that. So now you could have kind of two different stages of dynamics if you wanted to, and have it parallel. So that's one of the things that you could do using the direct routing. It's incredibly powerful because a lot of programs, it's very convoluted to set up, so you could actually just hear what's in the actual parallel bus and solo it and be able to tweak it. So now you could actually take both of those and combine. So it's basically splitting it down into two different parallel paths. And again, to make this happen, make sure that you have the direct routing summing mode on. But once you do that, you can really make some like huge sounding drum mixes without it sounding, you know, so completely squashed. So you kind of have the benefits of natural dynamics with the benefits of kind of a squashed drum sound, and you kind of find that balance between the two of them. So that's one of the big benefits of direct routing. All right, so just reading through some of the comments. Thanks again for all the great questions. So we have a question, is there a way to normalize all pads in Groove Agent at once? I'm inclined to think that it might be individual. Let me just try. I don't know a way of normalizing all the instrument pads within Groove Agent. I mean, if you have the audio file full of the folders, you could do that as part of the audio pool or a batch process in Wavelab. But I don't know a way of doing it simultaneously within Groove Agent. There could be a way, I just don't know off the top of my head. So let's go through some of our questions that were sent in. Thanks everyone for your patience. Okay, so I'm seeing question, if I don't have this particular plugin, if I render and place my easy drummer drums, create stereo tracks for all renders regardless of the track's original output. So when you do a render in place, the one thing to kind of be cognizant of is, it could often be based on the actual outputs of what's going on. So let me just open up in our project here. And let me just revert this. Okay, so kind of depending on, let's see if I have particular, let me just reload that real quick. Sorry about that. Let's get this loaded up. So when you're doing a render in place, the one thing to be kind of cognizant of is, there's some different settings that you can have. So if I wanted to, render in place just one particular little clip like this, depending on what you have selected, so we can go to the render in place, there's render settings, and some of these have changed a little bit over time. And what you want to do is to make sure, if you have it set up with, with your, basically including your effects channels, since the effects channels are stereo, that it will, then it will render a stereo file if it is a mono output. So, but if you do dry or channel, if it's a mono source, it will actually render a mono source if there's no stereo processing on it. So just be cognizant when you're using Easy Drummer that you might want to try just to do it as dry or with just a channel settings and see if that makes a difference in your mono or stereo behavior with that. We have a question: is there a difference between Groove Agent SE4 and a full Groove Agent 4? Yeah, one is you're going to have note repeat, a lot more libraries, a percussion agent, and the ability of running four different agents simultaneously, where you have a percussion agent as well as different drums, electronics. There's 3 different kits as well. So there's and the question is it worth buying the Absolute Collection for the plugin library? So the Absolute Collection is by far probably one of the best deals, especially with all the capabilities you get with HALion Sonic. So I think it's definitely worth, if you're doing it just for drums, just upgrade to Groove Agent. If you want just a whole, plethora of sounds, go for the Absolute. Okay, so we have a question on bouncing. It says, how do I get separate bounces also if I want to do some audio track automation for VST Instruments? How do I do that? So I think we covered the audio track automation, and if you want to do separate bounces, there's several ways. One is you could actually just take a number of different events here and choose to render in place. So if I just say, okay, let's render in place, and then we'll just do it dry here. You could just simply do it just like that. So you could do, a number of different events, is contiguous files, separate files. And you could do that, or you could do like a batch export as well. So we'll just do that in a second here. So we'll just render some more files. So as soon as we have these files rendered, then you'll be able to see. So I know a lot of people, and it doesn't have to be a MIDI track that's going to a particular audio source. These are just kind of panned accordingly, but it doesn't have to be a MIDI source. It could be audio that could also be rendered. So if you have a number of different audio edits, you could render just the audio as well. There's also, when you do an export audio mixdown, at this point there is a batch export, and here you could choose to also just say, I just want to take my group channels, my effects channels, my instrument channels, my VST audio channels, my all my plugin channels, the audio channels for this particular project, and render those as separate audio files, and you could create a new audio project if you wanted to, or just save them into a new folder. So either render in place or the export audio mixdown, and then just choosing the batch export from there should do the trick. So give that a try, and I think that will make sense for you to kind of easily create deliverables. Okay, just reading through some more questions and comments. Okay, so we had a question on Workspaces and remembering track and dealing with folder tracks. The question was, it seemed to ignore the status of folder tracks within a workspace, and I had the same behavior. I will go ahead and kind of pass that on to our planning team as well, to see if that's an intentional thing or just something that's not going to, if it's considered outside the scope of what is visible within a workspace. So the question was basically that the status of tracks in the folder track weren't being recalled with the workspace. so I can see it kind of both ways making sense, but I will pass that on to our planning department as well. Right, so let me go through some other topics here, make sure I didn't miss anything from the beginning. I'll go through some other topics as well from comments. So I'm seeing some comments that someone liked the user interfaces of earlier versions. You know, I kind of like where the user interface has gone to and evolved to, especially with the different zones to be able to see more. But obviously, everyone has their opinion. But I think what you can accomplish, and what you see now, even though it may be different from earlier versions, I find it hard to, with every new version. You know, initially I start off and it's like, oh, this is different than what I'm used to, and then after a couple weeks, I can't go back to a previous version. I feel that way, especially with Cubase Pro 9, that I couldn't go back to work with earlier versions, and I think that's kind of a good testament to the evolution of the user interface, but obviously that's a very subjective aspect as well. So all right, just cycling back. Oh, I'm sorry if I reset my screen share. I'm sorry if you haven't seen my screen. See if that gets my screen share back. I'm sorry. Okay, I think my screen is back. Sorry about that. All right, so question about sending samples to HALion or to PadShop directly from Mediabay instead. So let's say if I just come here, I'll just give us a try here real quick. Let me open up. Thanks for letting me know that you're just watching my face and not the screen. I think the screen is back. All right, so let me just go here to PadShop. So let me just try it with HALion. As well. So it looked like that was taking. Let me just load up an instance of HALion. So as soon as I drag and drop, I could just do it directly in HALion as well. So just go to edit. Let's get to your zone. So you could just drag and drop directly from your Mediabay directly to HALion or PadShop, it looks like already. So I'm not sure if it needs to be added. So give that a try and see if it works for you. So the question is, HALion still based on the Motif? There's a lot of the, it's HALion is based kind of well beyond what the Motif is doing. There's a lot of different forms of synthesis that are available in HALion that aren't in the Motif, and obviously the sampler component is way more advanced. Some of the sound design, some of the sound designers, the people that create the sounds, are the same, so you may see some similarities in some of the sounds, but it's not based on the Motif. It's kind of its own kind of engine and its own entity. But some of the wave ROM may be the same in the Motif and HALion, but it's not based on the Motif. Okay, so we had a question on the pool. Is there a way to erase files from the pool? Let me just go to a project that has more audio files in it. Okay, question is, when you delete files from the pool, can you just put them into the recycle bin and not delete them? So the pool itself, as soon as you come here and let's say if I deleted a file, I could say, okay, we're going to so let's say if I do a remove unused files, we could remove it from the pool itself and still leave it on the trash can, but the pool itself has a trash can. So if you deleted a file here, you could place it into the trash can. So it's not referenced by the pool, but can still be on your hard drive. So you can kind of work either way, or you could empty the trash just like you would on OS X, or empty the recycle bin like you would on Windows. So you can, the pool itself has its own trash can, so you can kind of work in a two-stage deletion process if necessary. Okay, so we have a question on using it with, let me just move the microphone here so I can read it. I'm new to Cubase Pro, but I'm having channel assignment issues with my TF-1. I assume that's a Yamaha TF-1. After creating new vocal track, do I assign it to channel 2 with a mixer input? So I have input to channel. So you probably are, if you have the TF-1 and that's a live console from Yamaha, once you have the available inputs, make sure that in Cubase, you go to your VST connections. I believe it's 32 channels of inputs or outputs. So let's say if I start here with just stereo, and that'll be kind of the default mode. So in this, I could actually just say, if I have a TF-1 and let's say, I think it's 32 channels over the USB, we could add mono. And the quicker way of doing this is to actually, if you wanted to increment and decrement, you could just say add bus, and I'll say 32 mono tracks. And you could label these kind of however you see fit. And then when you go to record an audio track, there you could set the input for the audio track in Cubase, so that at that point you could actually see, you know, which input is going to which particular channel. Now, one handy trick if you're doing a live recording, excuse me while I put the mic back in the stand. Let's say if I have my 32 tracks of audio, and I'll just select all these tracks here, and we'll put them into a folder just to kind of hide them from now. So let's say if I added 32 tracks of mono audio. At this point, if you wanted to increment the input and output, and I'll just do it here where we could see it a little easier. So say I have these 32 tracks and they're all kind of set to mono in. So if they're all selected, at this point, if you hold down the shift key, I could say mono in, and then it's going to automatically ripple the input. So we see mono in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I don't have to assign them one by one. I could hold down the shift key and that will automatically increment your input. So if you're doing live recording with the TF-1, that's a really great way of doing it. I think once you have the inputs assigned in your VST connections, that, and you could label those as well, that you'll be able to just simply have all those inputs easily assigned to different tracks in Cubase. All right, so when you asked a question about the Dante, so the Dante is Ethernet based, so you could connect that directly to like a Dante virtual sound card. I'm not sure if a license comes with the TF-1, but I think it's like $35, and then you could have connected to your laptop, and then you will see you can do up to 64 channels of recording to your laptop or any computer with just a simple Ethernet connection. If you need beyond 64, you can get like a Dante PCI accelerator. Yamaha makes one, and AIC 128, I believe, is the model. But so SPDIF would do 2 channels, and you need an audio interface that would have SPDIF inputs. So some laptops have SPDIF outputs, but not inputs. But the Dante, if you have that on the TF-1, that's a great way to get audio in and out just over a single Ethernet cable. Okay, so I think I got most of the questions that were sent in. If you have quick questions, and there's a lot of comments, but if you have quick questions, if you wanted to ask them in the comments field real quick, we could try to get to them. If I left it out, I try to catch a lot, but sometimes there's a lot of comments. So if you have a quick question before we wrap up, you could enter it in the comments field. Yeah, saying some love for Dante. Yeah, it's a beautiful connection protocol that is, you know, if you're not familiar with it, it's used a lot in live sound work, so that you can pass large number of audio channels over Ethernet. So instead of like having big copper snakes, it's very easy with Dante. So seeing some more questions roll in. If I missed your question, go ahead and just re-ask it. So Dominique, we'll try to get to it. Okay, so we had a question about sidechaining. Sidechaining for a filter on a compressor. So one of the things that you could do if you're looking kind of for like a sidechain input for a compressor is, you know, now with version 9, one of the things that you could do is if you have, let's say like Retrolog 2 and some other instruments, and obviously you can kind of do this with HALion. So a lot of the VST3 instruments can now have a sidechain input. So at this point, you could take an audio source and then just simply route it out to the sidechain in Retrolog, and that way you could run it through filters. So if you're doing this, one thing that maybe not make sense is you actually kind of have to have MIDI information being sent to it as well. So play MIDI notes if you don't hear it, but with the VST3 instruments, you can now sidechain directly into the filter section with that, so just like you would a compressor. Okay, so we had a question about enabled tracks within a large template. Let me see if there's a way in a project logical editor to do that. We could give this a try. Just take a quick look here for this. If you want to email me about I don't know of a way currently to kind of do it with the disabled tracks, but if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.net, I'd be happy to take a look, see if I come up with a workaround on that. So I see the question, what's the best way to export separate drum tracks from Cubase? If they're audio, all you'd need to do is you could just simply, when you do your audio mix down, is just to have your different audio tracks here and do a batch export. And you can kind of do a similar thing if you have different virtual instruments. I'll just cancel that. If you have different virtual instruments, if you choose to render in place, or you could, you know, base it on the outputs as well. And at that point, you could just simply render multiple outputs of different drums to independent tracks based on the assignments in the instrument within Cubase as well. So we had a question, what time do you start Pacific time? It's usually 10 a.m. Pacific time that we start. We start 1 p.m. so we kind of catch some people in Asia, some people in Europe, and people in the U.S. But they're always available to view offline afterwards. Okay, with that, it looks like we're kind of wrapping up on questions. I'd like to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. If you have questions that you want me to that could be a little more involved, please feel free to send them to clubcubase@steinberg.net. That way I could kind of prepare different projects if needed to answer the questions. If there's any just super quick last minute questions, please feel free to ask us and let us know. And if not, I hope everyone learned a tip or trick or two. And we're also kind of starting a new video series that started late last week, or just Q&A sessions. So if you have particular topics that you want covered in just a dedicated video that's specifically focused on one topic, email that to us, and then we're happy to take kind of user questions and generate videos to help others as well. Yeah, and I see people are getting shy about emailing. Please don't feel free. Please feel free to email any question. We just want to make sure that everyone's learning something from these. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and start to wrap up. Again, thank you for your time. Thanks for all the great questions, and we will see you next time. I think we may try to do it the last Friday, the next Hangout for the last Friday in June. I'm going to be traveling a bit until then. So if a Friday night, would a Friday Hangout be okay, or is that just a horrible night for everyone, or horrible day? So probably the last Friday in June. So if you guys just want to leave a comment in the comments field, let me know if that makes sense, or if that's a stupid idea to try to do one on a Friday. Just let me know real quick, and we'll wrap up here in just a minute. So I see a question or a comment, workstation presets. Not sure what workstation is. Is that a typo maybe? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and end the Hangout. Thank you again so much for everyone for participating in the Hangout, and hope that everyone's learned a tip or trick, and we'll end here. Thank you so much.